that this morning? Let me hear stand amen. Amen. Let's think about what we're saying this morning. Nothing shall be impossible. Your kingdom reigns unstoppable. We'll shout your praise forevermore. Jesus, our God, unstoppable. Nothing shall be impossible. Your kingdom reigns unstoppable. We'll shout your praise forevermore. Jesus, our God, unstoppable. Nothing shall be impossible. Your kingdom reigns unstoppable. We'll shout your praise forevermore. Jesus, our God, unstoppable. Nothing shall be impossible. Your kingdom reigns unstoppable. We'll shout your praise forevermore. Jesus, our God, unstoppable. Unstoppable God, let your glory go on and on. Impossible things in your name, they shall be done. Unstoppable God, let your glory go on and on. Impossible things in your name, they shall be done. Unstoppable God, let your glory go on and on. Impossible things in your name, they shall be done. Let her lift up this morning. You can sit down. I didn't know what that meant or what he was.
Everybody good. Sit down. Sit Tori, you gotta say. We're gonna need him in just a second. You guys know me, I'm always switching stuff up last minute. There we go, Tori. But we're gonna start off this morning. I don't know if we've ever done this since I've been here. We've done baptisms in the morning, but this morning we're gonna start off with our servant song. We've got somebody that's gonna join our family, and I could spend about 30 minutes talking about this young lady and still have plenty of things that I could share with her. Nicole, come on up here with me. She's a little nervous, probably going to be a little cranky. She's been up all night. She graduated yesterday, and then Project Grad all night. Did you sleep at all? 2 hours. Not to be able to do anything. Wait till you that's right. That's the thing about she's Nico to me. That's her. She played ball for me. Nico is such a leader. God has placed such a leader's heart in her that was very evident from the get-go. I've had a running joke with her. I've been pretty mad at her for a while because she didn't come play softball for me until her senior year. So I was mad at her for the 3 years that she didn't come because of what all she brought to our team. But I want you to think about this. 18 years old, graduated last night. Like Dale said, she's here this morning.
Amen.
And I don't mean this in any negative way. Everything about this is positive, but she's by herself. That's some strong 2 feet right there that this girl's got. God has really, really been moving in Nico's life. I mean, you saw her. She's baptized Easter Sunday morning. God has shown her the direction that He wants her to go. And of course, Satan's been fighting her hard ever since then. But she's remained constant. She's remained vigilant. She comes to me. She comes to others to seek advice and wisdom. Not me so much on the wisdom part. That's more of the deep thing. But Nico's going with us. She's one of the members on the mission trip, the upcoming mission trip. And I'm just super excited to see what God has in store for her. So this morning, as we sing our servant song to our sister, I just want you to think for a minute. Put yourself in her shoes right now at 18 years old. And I know that we pray for everybody. We mean it when we do the servant song. One of my favorite things that this church does. I want you to think about what God's presenting to us as a church family right now. And the opportunity that we have to lead, guide, support Nicole. Because God's just now starting in her life. Just now starting. So, we're going to get this part over with. And if Nicole sleeps a little bit throughout the service, it's okay today, alright? Alright, let's do it. Stand and help us sing.
Great
Brittany, where you at? So no, okay. Make sure I get this right. We've got the Priceless Girls event that's going to begin at 8 o'clock and go to 5 o'clock here at the church. And this is going to be for grade girls only, grades 7 through 12, correct?
Going into 7th grade.
Going into, so if you're in the 6th grade, it's going to count. You can come on going into the 7th grade through the 12th. Got guest speakers lined out, some personal, like devotional time, one-on-one opportunities for our girls. There's some flyers that are posted throughout the church. See Brittany if you have any questions. Also, if you plan to or able to help with this event, ladies, plan on helping with the event, could you meet with Brittany for 2 or 3 minutes when service is over? Good luck with that, because you're asking people to get to the back of the line now. But check with Brittany after this is over. Next Sunday, Mother's Day. So let's be ready to have a really, really big smile on our face and welcome and make all our moms feel happy. Church app. How many of you guys have got the church app downloaded and using it so far? Pretty good, pretty good. If you don't, you need to get that. Super, super cool. All the reminders, all the announcements, the schedules, the menus are all on there. Go to your app store if you're an iPhone user. If you're not an iPhone user, I don't know what you use. I guess it's Google Play or something like that. But whatever you use to download your apps, do that. Go to Living Word Baptist, download that. You'll really, really find that handy. Our upcoming mission trip, we're getting close. Those dates are for the 22nd through the 29th of June. The team will be going to Rio San Juan, Dominican Republic. The 19th of this month, Gary Hannah-Bass, however you want to pronounce it, our trip leader will be here. He's coming through. We've worked it out to where he's going to be able to come worship with us. We're working out whether he's going to present the message that day or just let you guys kind of know about the trip. He's already been over there to the area we're going to be at once. So looking forward to that. Mark this one down. June the 1st. Okay, we'll get with you on specific time. June the 1st, we're going to do a fish fry. Okay, sell plates for a fundraiser for this upcoming mission trip. Okay, June the 1st, we'll have a fish fry. Probably be in the evening, 5 or 6. This is what I'm thinking, but it'll be back in the back. June the 1st, please put that down. We need to secure our funds for the team. And the team, again, is Donnie, myself, Noah, and Nico. Also going to be designing a shirt. Be looking for that. We'll do a pre-order for this. Everybody likes a t-shirt. So that'll be another way that we can try to raise some money for this upcoming trip. If God lays it on your heart just to put some money towards this mission trip, mark it on the envelope for Roger. Go talk to Roger, and he'll let you know where we're at on that. Any other announcements? I'm forgetting something. Yeah. Listen, that's shady. I'm doing something big. Roger puts out like a box for me, and Donnie's got like a coffee mug. Okay? I'm going to draw up a clause for this whole beard shaving thing. It's like X amount of dollars has to be raised. I'm putting the camera back there because I do know that when somebody does put something in that little coffee mug, he's dumping it into my pocket. But I know it's real. I mean, I'm just trying to accept, what's coming. I know it's going to happen. But to God be the glory. That's all I'm going to say about that. Any other announcements? Seriously, though, we do have a little running bet going back there in a good way. If my box gets more money, the beard's gone. If Donnie's gets more, which isn't going to happen, he was supposed to grow one for a year, if he can. Anyways, any other announcements? All right, let's pray. Our Heavenly Father, we do thank you Lord, thank you for Nico. Lord, her heart, God, changing, Lord, the direction that she is going. We lift her up as a church. Let her know that we're here for support. God, I pray for the upcoming mission trip, Lord, the funds we needed to go and do what you have commanded us to do, is to preach your good news into all the world. Lord, now I just pray as we continue to focus on worshiping you through our voices, and then turn it over to Donnie for the message that you laid on his heart. I pray that our hearts are receptive this morning. We love you and we thank you for it's in your son Jesus' name. Amen.
Let's sing again. Go ahead.
You All right, kiddos. You know what I love more than anything is seeing kiddos like Nicole be a light for you all. Because before we know it, you guys are going to be seniors in high school. Let's not rush it, okay? Take our time. Let's get past first grade, right? And you know what? That's an awesome role model for you guys. And you know what? I look forward to you guys. You're about to get awards for Awana, aren't you? Our Awana year, it wraps up. You guys have worked so hard on your books. And I love towards the end of this year, they're coming up and they're like, Miss Megan, I finished my book. Because that's what they look forward to. But it's not about finishing their book. Most of them have learned 50 Bible verses.
Amen.
And it's not learning them, they're memorizing them. You did yours? I know. And who knew? They can get so excited about learning their Bible verses. Right? You guys like learning your Bible verses? No. Yeah, that's right. And you know what? Yeah, the most important thing is watching you guys get up here. Watching you guys get up here and being able to give you guys your awards because you've worked so hard. And knowing in your heart how filled your heart is. I hope that you guys, how full your heart is. I hope you guys always know that that love that you feel, that heart, that's God's love. And it never goes away. Alright? He always loves you guys. And I hope that, and I look forward to you guys being seniors in high school like Nicole. And after only 2 hours of sleep, are you guys still going to be here? That was a definite no from this one. And you know what? I am so proud of you, Nicole, for being here and being an example. All right, you guys are chatting. Let's go.
Go ahead.
Amen. Let's sing one more song. We'll try that again.
I believe in the sun. I believe in the risen one. I believe I overcome by the power of His blood. Amen. Amen. I'm alive because He lives. Amen. Amen. Let my song join the one that never ends because He lives. I was dead in the grave. I was covered in sin and shame. I heard mercy call my name. He rolled the stone away. Amen. Amen. I'm alive because He lives. Amen. Amen. Let my song join the one that never ends because He lives. I can face tomorrow because He lives. Every fear is gone. I know He holds my life, my future in His hands. Amen. Amen. I'm alive because He lives. Amen. Amen. Let my song join the one that never ends. Amen. Amen. I'm alive because He lives. Amen. Amen. Let my song join the one that never ends because He
Amen. Amen. You may be seated.
Thank you, Tracy. Take your Bibles this morning, turn to Luke chapter 20. There's not 27 chapters in Luke. Luke chapter 5, verse 27 is where we're going to be today. We need to pray for Kevin this morning. Kevin Shepard, as we said a couple weeks ago, he left. He's not deployed yet out of the States. He's going to be over in Saudi Arabia and or actually Kuwait. So be praying for Kevin. I got a text from Kevin this week, and I just got to read it to you before we get started this morning. Kevin texted me, I think it was Thursday night, and it's here. Okay, he says he was so excited last Thursday. He said this. He said, God used me to snatch another soul out of the devil's death grip.
Hallelujah.
I'm fulfilling my purpose for this deployment, and we haven't even left yet. God is good. So pray for Kevin. Witness to someone this week, and that person accepted the Lord. And that's what we're all called to do. Now, I want to talk to you today about who can follow Jesus. Who can follow Jesus? But before we do, I want to talk about an exclusive club. Some of you may have heard of this club. It's the most exclusive, well, one of the most exclusive clubs in the world. A lot of people think it is the most exclusive club. I'm going to talk about another, more exclusive club in just a moment. But there's only one qualification that allows you to be a part of this particular club. And amazingly enough, it's not money. Money won't get you into this club. I looked this up. There's a man by the name of Carlos Slim. He is the richest person in the world. His net worth is $70.6 billion. Now in the United States, the richest man is Bill Gates. His net worth is $60.4 billion. But neither of these men, as much money as they have, can buy themselves into this club. It's not money that allows you to get in. And it's also not fame either. The two most famous people in the world, the most recognizable faces, I should say, in the world, one of them is Hillary Clinton. The other one is Tiger Woods. It's not fame that gets you into this club. And it's not popularity either. According to Twitter, among the most popular people on the planet are Justin Timberlake, Taylor Swift, Katy Perry, and Aaron Burr. So you need to put money in his garbage. None of them are allowed into this club, even by popularity. It's not influence. Did you know that the 21st century surveys say that the most influential, three of the most influential people in the 21st century, one of them was Steve Jobs. You know, he developed Microsoft, right? Apple, yeah, I'm sorry, Apple. Bill Gates did Microsoft. Well, Steve Jobs was one of the most influential people. The other two, Oprah Winfrey and Mark Zuckerberg. He created Facebook. The most exclusive club in the world has only 5 living members. 5 living members. Anyone want to guess the title? Because you get in by having a title. It's a title you must have to get into this club. Anybody want to guess? You're right. It's the president. Only 5 living presidents. And you have to be the president of the United States to be in this exclusive club. It's called the President's Club. But as I said a while ago, there is a more impressive club than that. I believe it's far more fascinating, far more exciting, and definitely far more important that you be a part of this club. And that's the club that's made up of followers of Jesus Christ.
Amen.
Amen. Amen. That club is made up of followers of Jesus Christ. And you know what? You only have to have one qualification to get into this club, to join this club. And it's what I'm going to talk to you about today. This is what it is. You have to be a missing person. A missing person. That's what I'm going to call a lost person today. A missing person. A missing person is just anybody that's far away from God. Anybody that's far away from God can be invited to come near to God. Just like Kevin did this week in the military, someone he met this week. He invited them to come near to God because they were far from God. Well, I want you to see this morning, and those of you that are here and those of you that are watching, there is an Amber Alert. An Amber Alert on anyone that's far from God. Jesus even said the reason why he left heaven and came to earth was to find and rescue missing persons. In Luke chapter 19, verse 10, it says, "The Son of Man has come to seek and save those who are lost." Well, did you know who the first missing persons were that Jesus found? Way back first century. The first missing persons that Jesus found were 4 poor fishermen. Their names were Peter, Andrew, James, and John. They're just 4 fishermen. They were missing persons, though, because they were far away from God. They were very far away from God. And Jesus invited Peter, Andrew, James, and John. He invited them to come near to God. And amazingly, they did. They did. And when they decided to follow him, this is what Jesus said to these 4 men. He said, "Now, from now on, I don't want your main priority in life to be fishing for fish. I want you to fish for men. I want you to fish for missing persons. And I'm sure that raised some questions with them. For example, someone were to come up to me today after church and say, hey, tomorrow, I'd like to take you fishing. I can tell you right now, it's not going to happen. But still, if someone were, one of the first questions I would ask is, well, what kind of fish are we going to be fishing for? So, when Jesus asked these disciples, I want you to stop fishing for fish, and I want you to start fishing for men, I believe probably one of them asked the question, what kind of missing people are we looking for? What kind of people are we to invite? What kind of people are we to look at? Well, these disciples, over the next 3 years, Jesus is going to teach them, and he's not only going to teach them, beginning in this passage today, he's going to show them how to look for missing people. Now, this is what I want you to take out the door today. This is what I want you, if you don't get anything else, I want you to remember this phrase. And this is it. Everybody is to be invited to follow Jesus. And anybody can. That's good news. Everybody is to be invited to follow Jesus, and anybody can. Now, let's see if you got that. Who can follow Jesus? All right. Everybody. And who's to be invited? Everybody. And who can? Anybody. That's exactly right. Well, what I want us to look at today is that everybody can be invited and anybody can follow Jesus. Here's what Jesus is going to do. Jesus has told these new friends of his, Andrew, Peter, James, and John, he's told them that this is what I'm going to show you how to do. You know, Jesus doesn't ask us something without giving us directions on how to do it. So the same way Jesus invited them, we're going to see that he invites some other people. And there's 3 things I want you to take home today. There's 3 things I want you to write down and remember this morning. Let's talk about the first one. Number 1. It's simply this. We're to ask everyone to follow Jesus. We're to ask everyone to follow Jesus. It doesn't matter who you are, or who they are, or where they come from. The Bible tells us it's a mandate. It's our responsibility as believers to ask everyone to follow Jesus. Look at, if you found Luke chapter 5, let's look at verse 27. After this, after what? After he invited these 4 men, they accepted. It says, after this, he went out and saw a tax collector named Levi. A tax collector named Levi, sitting at the tax booth, and he said to him, follow me. Now, there's a lot you need to know about this. The disciples thought they were just, out taking a nice stroll with Jesus that afternoon. And they passed by this tax booth, like they had many times. But unlike Jesus, when these 4 men passed by that tax booth, they probably turned their heads. They probably refused to look at the man sitting in the tax booth because he was hated. He was a hated individual. And we're told that Jesus saw Levi. Look at that verse again. If you look back up there, it says, after this, he went out and saw. Now that's an interesting word in the Greek, because it doesn't mean just a glance. When Jesus looked at Levi, this is what that word saw meant. It meant he stared at and focused intently on. So here the other guys, they're walking by this tax collector. He's a hated individual. Nobody liked him. He's a scum little life. And Jesus just stops. And he starts looking Levi up and down. He's just looking at Levi. And you have to keep this in mind. At this time, Jesus' popularity is growing and growing and growing. I don't have any doubt that Levi knew who Jesus was. And Jesus walks over to Levi. And he opens his mouth. And he says probably the last thing Levi thought he would ever hear Jesus say. He said, Levi, follow me. Follow me. I want you, Levi, to be one of my disciples. Now, that may not seem like a big deal when you take it at face value, but you have to understand the customs and the things that were going on in the first century. The word disciple, it meant something totally different than it means today. Today we think of a disciple as a student, maybe a student in a school, a student in a seminary. But back then it didn't just mean student, it meant an apprentice. An apprentice. A disciple was someone who didn't just learn a skill. A disciple was someone who learned a new way of life. So when Jesus said to Levi, "Follow me," he was saying, in essence, he was saying, I don't want you just to change the way you think. I want you to change the way you live. Levi, I don't want to change you from the outside in. I want to change you from the inside out. And what was even more amazing, both to Levi and to the disciples, Jesus was considered a rabbi. In fact, a lot of people called him rabbi. And back in the day, rabbis didn't ask people to be their disciples. If you wanted to be a disciple of a particular rabbi, you had to fill out an application, just like going to a college or something. You had to be asked to be, or you had to ask first to be a disciple. In order to be a disciple, you had to have a particular background, and it'd be just like going to a college. You had to have a certain GPA, you had to have a certain ACT score. You had to meet certain requirements before you would even be considered to be a disciple of a rabbi. You were expected to have a very impressive knowledge of the first 5 books of the Old Testament. In fact, they could ask you, hey, quote one of those whole books. And you'd have to do it. You had to have that kind of knowledge. See, the selection to be a disciple for a rabbi in those days, it was intense. It was very meticulous. And it was very, very painstaking. And rabbis wouldn't just ask anyone to join them. One of the reasons is because the reputation of the rabbi often depended on the quality of their disciples. So Jesus comes along, and he does something that no other rabbi would ever do. Instead of someone asking Jesus, he asked them to be his disciple. Jesus instead invited people to follow him. He does the asking. No application. He just gave them an invitation. Now, the disciples, remember those first 4 men that Jesus is called to be his disciples, Andrew, Peter, James, and John. They're watching all this from a distance. They're taking all this in, and they're probably thinking, I can't believe Jesus is doing this. I can't believe what he's doing. What Jesus was doing with Levi is exactly what he wanted them to do with other people. What Jesus was doing with Levi is exactly what he wants us to do with other people. You know, our 30th president, I believe, was Calvin Coolidge. And he once said, the business of America is business. I want you guys to get this morning. You know what the business of Living Word Baptist Church is, and what the business of every church and every individual Christian should be? It should be finding lost people, finding missing people, and inviting them to know Jesus. We're in the missing people business. Every church should be. Now, our number one job, as we go about our day, as we go about making our living, is to be looking for these people who are far away from God, these missing people, and inviting them to follow Jesus. Now, Aaron told you a while ago about a mission trip we're getting ready to go on in the last of next month to Sanrio, Dominican Republic. And this is something I want you to realize. Jesus has told us to go. There's something called the Great Commission, where he said, go into Judea, and Samaria, and Jerusalem. And he said, go into the innermost, outermost parts of the earth and invite people to follow me. But when you do a mission trip, it shouldn't just be about inviting people in another country. It's always bothered me as a pastor when I see people getting excited about a mission trip, but they won't go across the street and invite their neighbor. You see, there's nothing wrong with going across the world and inviting people. Jesus has told us to do that, but He's told us to invite the people across the street too. And we're to do both. So, anybody, why should we do that? Because anybody, everybody should be invited to follow Jesus. And what? Anybody can. And if that wasn't enough now, Jesus inviting this tax collector to follow Him and to be His disciple, if that wasn't enough, what Jesus is about to do next really blew everyone away. Because not only are we going to learn today that we should ask everybody, to invite everybody to follow Jesus, number two, we are to accept anyone willing to follow Jesus. Again, this is going to blow some of you away perhaps. Does anyone know what the first command Jesus gave was? The first command that Jesus gave as He started His earthly ministry, you know what it was? Follow me. Follow me. And we've already seen how unusual His method was and how He invited people to follow Him. But what He's about to do is even more shocking. It's whom He invited. Look at verse 27. After this, again, let's read it again. After this, He went out and saw a tax collector named Levi sitting at the tax booth. Now, if it wasn't radical enough for Jesus to ask people to be His disciple, when the custom was the rabbis never asked, disciples had to ask to be a disciple. And but when you look at the list of the people that Jesus chose, I think we could say none of them would have made the who's who list of anybody. There wasn't one biblical scholar among any of them. There wasn't a strong leader in the beginning among any of them. No mover, no shaker, no one special. So far, all He's asked is a bunch of poor fishermen. But of all the missing persons, of all the lost people, of all the possible disciples that Jesus could have called, there is one kind of missing person that Jesus would have never invited to be His disciple, and that was a tax collector. You see, the Bible tells us that Levi is a tax collector. He worked for the Roman government. And you may not see why that's such a big deal. Well, here's why it was a big deal. The Romans, they hadn't enslaved the Jewish people, but they were ruling over the Jewish people. The Jewish people were taken in captivity over Rome, from Rome. And the Romans collected taxes from the Jews. And they used a system known as tax farming. And they divided all the country up, and it was kind of like we do today. They divided them up in sections, what we call counties. And every county or every district, it had a fixed tax that everyone had to pay. And then they sold the right to collect those taxes to people, basically the lowest bidder. Now, what am I talking about? Anybody, see, the Romans didn't want to collect the taxes, so they allowed the opportunity for a Jew to step up and collect the taxes for them. Now, there were two categories of taxes that everybody had to pay. There was the direct tax, otherwise known as fixed taxes, in which it was called a poll tax, and everybody had to pay simply because they were alive. If you're alive, you had to pay taxes. But then there was another tax that everyone had to pay. It's called the ground tax, which required 1/10 of all the grain, all the wine or the oil that any farmer produced. It was called an income tax, basically 1%. It had to go to the Romans. But here's where the tax collectors made their money. It was in the indirect tax. You see, the duties of this tax collector was to collect the taxes for Rome. But as long as Rome was satisfied, they could collect other taxes too, and over and beyond what they gave to Rome. And so, for instance, if you're walking down the road and this tax collector, Levi, saw you, he could say, hey, I'm going to charge you a road tax because you're walking on this road. And he could basically use any amount that he wanted. And he could pocket that money. If you're pushing a cart down the road, he could say, hey, I got to count the number of wheels on your cart, and we're going to charge you tax on that. He looked in your bag. If you're carrying a bag, you had a bottle of wine in there, he could charge you a wine tax. These people were taxed out of this world. And they hated tax collectors because it was one of their own brothers that were doing this and working for Rome. They were considered traitors. You know, if you're carrying a private letter, the tax collector, Levi in this case, he could say, show me that letter. And in that letter you were doing business with someone, he could charge you an additional tax for that. The problem was he could charge whatever he wanted over and beyond what the government required, and then he could pocket all that for himself. It was the first case in history of taxation without representation. Well, I was reading that this week, and I found this real cute little story. It reminds me, it's a true story. A little boy one day was needing $10. And he asked his mom for $10. He said, well, why don't you pray to God that God will send you $10? Well, for 2 weeks he prayed, God, send me $2. Would you send me $2? Well, he hadn't got anything, so he thought, I'll write God a letter. So he sat down and he wrote God a letter requesting the $10. Now, when he mailed that letter, the Postal Service, they received the letter, and it was addressed to God, USA. Well, they didn't know what to do with it, so they routed it to the White House and to the then President, Bill Clinton. Well, Clinton was so impressed with and touched and probably amused by this little boy who had written the letter to God. So he had one of his aides send $5 to this little boy. And this little boy was excited when he got the letter back, and he sat down and he wrote another letter, a thank you letter to God. And this is what the letter said. Thank you very much. Dear God, thank you very much for sending me the money. However, I noticed that for some reason you had to send it through Washington, D.C. And as usual, they deducted half of it. Well, that's kind of what Levi was. He was the tax collector. And you know, he was a missing person, but he was a missing person that nobody missed. He was a hated individual. Tax collectors, they couldn't go to church. They were banned from the synagogue. Their word was as useless and worthless as anything, so they couldn't even testify in a court of law. They were on the same level as murderers and robbers, pimps, prostitutes. And it even gets worse. Tax collectors were probably disowned by their own family. Now, how do I know that? How do I know that Levi was the black sheep of his family? Well, if you know anything about the name Levi, Levi was the priestly tribe. And it was the tribe that all the priests came from in the Jewish faith. And you could only be called or named Levi if someone in your family was a priest or had been a priest. So evidently it's likely that Levi's father had been one of the priests, or his grandfather had been one of the priests. And probably when he was born, they thought, you're going to be the next priest, so we're going to name you Levi. Now watch this. Levi decided, evidently, I'm not going to be a priest. I'm going to abandon my Jewish faith. I'm going to abandon my heritage, and I'm going to be a tax collector. I'm going to be a traitor. When everyone else would walk by his tax booth, they would curse him, they'd spit at him. Yet Jesus said the very same thing to him that he did to Andrew, Peter, James, and John. What did he say? He said, hey Levi, follow me. You know, inviting James and John and Peter in, it made sense because they were good guys. All four of them were devout Jewish people. They came from families that worked hard and they made an honest living and they were faithful attenders to the synagogue. But a traitor? Why would Jesus call a traitor Why would he call it tax collector? Well, hold your seats here, because Jesus' choice in disciples even gets more interesting. Because we read down in verse 15, over to the next chapter, chapter 6. It says, and Simon, he's calling another disciple, and Simon, who is called the Zealot, over in Luke 6:15. Let me tell you something about zealots. I told you a lot about tax collectors. Let me tell you something about zealots. Simon the Zealot was on the other end of the spectrum than Levi the tax collector. You see, the Zealot, Simon, would be what we would call today a terrorist. He was like a freedom fighter. He absolutely hated the Roman Empire, the Roman government. If you wanted someone to kill Levi, Simon would have been your man. He would have been the hitman that you would have chose. So Jesus is choosing his disciple, this little band of brothers that he's putting together. And on one hand, you got a tax collector, and on the other hand, you've got a terrorist. And he did something even more amazing than that. He brought them together. I would have loved to have heard that conversation. He goes to Simon and says, Simon, you're a zealot? Yes, I am. You're a freedom fighter? You're a terrorist? That's me. You hate Romans and tax collectors? Yes, I do. You want me to kill one? Jesus says, will you follow me? And he says, sure. He goes to Levi. Levi, you're a collaborator with the Roman government, a tax collector, a traitor. Will you follow me? And Levi says, sure. And I just imagine Jesus saying, great, Simon, you're running with Levi. How could such a thing happen? How could that happen? How in the world could Jesus stoop so low to invite one man who is a thief to his own people? And on the other hand, invite another man who would have had no qualms about cutting the head off of a Roman baby. How could he do that? Well, it's real simple. What did we say in the beginning? Because everyone is invited to follow Jesus, and anyone can. Now, if that lesson didn't blow you away, Jesus is about to say, you've not seen anything yet. Because not only are we to ask everyone to follow Jesus, not only are we to accept everyone who follows Jesus, who's willing to follow Jesus. Number 3, we are to associate with those who don't follow Jesus. Let me repeat that. We are to associate with those who don't follow Jesus. Now, I want you to watch how this story winds up, because this is so cool. What happens next, to me, is even more incredible than Levi, the tax collector, leaving a well-paid job and following Jesus. Or this terrorist saying, I'm willing to give up all violence and follow Jesus. Look what happens in verse 29. And Levi made him a great feast in his house. And there was a large company of tax collectors and others reclining at the table with them. Well, here's what's happened. Levi gets up after Jesus invites him to be his disciple. And he walks away. He walks away from this $1 million job. Leaves everything and follows Jesus. He says, Lord, I'm so excited about my new life. I'm so excited about following you. I'm so excited about turning to a new way of life. He said, I want to celebrate. And Jesus says, well, why don't you throw a party? And Levi says, well, would you come? And Jesus said, I'd be glad to come. Who can I invite? He didn't know, like he had a lot of friends. And he thought for a moment, he goes, could I invite my other tax collector friends? And he says, I think that'd be a great idea. You know, let me ask you a question. Who do missing persons hang out with? Other missing persons. Who do people who are far from God hang out with? Usually other people who are very far from God. So now you've got Levi throwing this party at his house. And you got a room full of these low-down tax collectors. I want you to listen to me real carefully. When you accept the call to follow Jesus, now I got to tell you, I didn't learn this growing up. In fact, growing up in church, I learned right the opposite of this. But this is what I've learned from reading the Bible. When you accept the call to follow Jesus, Jesus does not call you to isolation. He calls you to association. You see, here's what's wrong with a lot of us today, me included. I've had to fight this. You see, we get saved. We decide to follow Jesus. Maybe someone asks us, or whatever. And maybe it's in the church service. But we get saved. And we decide to follow Jesus. And you know what we do then? We get into these little holy huddles. This is a holy huddle here today. And you know, we find the particular holy huddle that we want to get in. Let me tell you what you got to do to be in my holy huddle. I told you I fight this too. Well, you got to do 5 things. You got to love Jesus. You want to be in my holy huddle. You got to love Jesus. You got to read your Bible. You got to pray. You got to go to church. You got to tithe. You got to tithe. You're supposed to laugh at that, okay? And that's what you got to do to be in my holy huddle. To be in my holy huddle. And you see, we get into these little holy huddles, and well, the problem was, I grew up thinking that's what Christians do. And the moment I became a saved person instead of a missing person, I thought, now my job is to avoid all other missing persons. My job is to stay away from people like Levi, and stay away from people like Simon. And you know what Jesus says? No, that's not our job. It's not our job. Our job is not to avoid missing persons. Our job is to go fishing for them. Right? You know you're with me or not? That's right. We're to go and find them and invite them to follow Jesus. Now, here is this big party going on at Simon's or at Levi's house. This big party going on with the most despised, low-life people in all of Israel. And guess what? Who's right in the middle of it? Jesus. Jesus. I heard someone say once, someone observed, that people who were nothing like Jesus, liked Jesus. Why don't people like us as believers? Why is it so hard? Now, I realize that we're facing an enemy who is Satan. But you know, we do a pretty good job of that ourselves. Turning people off. Believers, turning lost people off. Let me tell you why it's so important that we need to get out of our holy huddles. And we need to start associating with missing persons and lovingly and gently and naturally introducing them to Jesus. Let me tell you why. And I found this to be true. When people who are far away from God truly meet the Son of God, they want to draw near to God. It just happens. People who are far away from God, when they truly meet the Son of God, they want to get close to God too. Now, y'all are quiet. And I don't know why. I hope not, but somebody might be getting ready to get a rock thrown at them right now. Okay? So get ready to duck if you need to. Do you know who hates this kind of preaching? Do you know who hates this kind of sermon the most? Religious people. Religious people. Church-going people. The big black Bible, King James only kind of people. Listen what happens next in verse 30. Look at verse 30. And the Pharisees and their scribes, what they did? Grumbled at his disciples, saying, "Why do you eat and drink with tax collectors and sinners?" Who are the Pharisees and the scribes? The exact opposite of the tax collectors and the sinners. They're religious, church-going people, pew sitters. They've dotted every I and they've crossed every T. I'm going to be very honest with you. I had to battle with that attitude myself. I still sometimes have to battle with this attitude myself. Sometimes I've looked at people. I've looked down at people who maybe are doing things that I would never do. Or have done things that I've never done. And I never said it out loud. But I've had this smug little attitude in my heart that says something like this: "I'm so glad I'm not like you. I'm so glad I'm not a sinner like you." And I used to think, and like I said, growing up in a very conservative church, I was taught, you stay away from those kind of people. But after God doing a work in my heart, after me reading some of the same verses that I'm preaching to you today, I realized those are the very people that we need to seek out. Amen. Those are the very people that we need to find and invite to have a relationship with Jesus. Because listen how Jesus answers these religious do-gooders in verse 31. And Jesus answered them, "Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick." You see what Jesus is saying to this very religious crowd? Do you know why they got so angry at Jesus? He said, "You religious fanatics are farther from God than the people you think are the farthest from God." There are two kinds of people in this story. There were the people who thought they were too good for Jesus, or the people that thought Jesus was too good for them. And you know, in honesty, Jesus is too good for all of us. Yes. Because he was perfect. But there were people who thought, I can never follow Jesus because he's too good for me. That's the people like Levi and Simon. Then there were the people who thought they were too good for Jesus. That's the Pharisees. The first group of people, those who thought they were just not good enough, guess what? They became followers. The second group of people, the Pharisees, they became failures. So, let me close with some good news this morning. Maybe you all will come back alive. There's only one qualification to becoming a follower of Jesus. There's only one thing you have to do. You know what it is? You got to be a sinner. That's it. That's it. You know, when I read that, I think, I'm in. I'm in. And so are you. Because the Bible says all have sinned and fallen short of God's glory. I'm going to talk more about that next week. Let me tell you why. If you're not a sinner, if you don't think you're a sinner, then you don't need to follow Jesus. Because you don't need Jesus. But again, there's a problem with that. Because the Bible says all have sinned. It's because you don't see yourself spiritually sick in need of a spiritual doctor named Jesus Christ. The bottom line is this. Let me ask you again, so you still remember. Who is invited to follow Jesus? Everyone. Now maybe there's someone here today, or maybe there's someone watching today. They hear that and they say, but I have a promiscuous sexual past. You're invited. I have a criminal record. I've served time. You're invited. I've been divorced 3 times. You're invited. I am a recovering alcoholic. You're invited. I'm a pothead, sex addict, hypocrite. You're invited to. Again, who's invited to follow Jesus? Everyone is. Everyone is invited to follow Jesus, and anyone can. Now you need to understand one thing. A lot of preachers would close it right there. And I just can't do it. I'm not saying I'm better. I'm just saying God won't let me stop right here. You need to understand one thing. Jesus expects the same response as he got from Simon and he got from Levi. I got to tell you the truth. It's in verse 28. In Luke chapter 5. And leaving everything, he rose and followed him. Did I read that right? Yes. It says he left everything. Levi walked away from this $1 million crooked job that he was in. Levi lost everything when he followed Jesus. Listen, if you're going to follow Jesus, you're going to lose some things. You might lose some friends. You know what? You might lose more than that. Before you get a second thought, remember this. Following Jesus might cost you everything. But refusing to follow Jesus is going to cost you a whole lot more. If Levi had said no to Jesus, he would have died a filthy rich man. But you know what? You and I would have never heard of him. And 2,000 years later, I wouldn't be here today talking about him. But because Levi chose to follow Jesus, you know what Jesus did with Levi? He changed his name. He changed his name to Matthew. To Matthew, which means gift from God. He went on, this ex-tax collector, to write the first gospel in the New Testament. And as I was writing this message, God gave me this thought. I got to be honest, sometimes I get prideful thoughts. I get prideful when I have thoughts like this, man, that's good. And then God has to remind me where the thought came from. But this is a thought that God gave me. The best this world has to offer is trash compared to the worst that Jesus can give you. I'm so glad. Every day I wake up that everybody should be invited to follow Jesus. And that anybody can. And I am so glad I did. Are you?
Amen.
Amen. Stand with me this morning. Well, I don't know where this sermon lands today. I've covered a lot of different directions. But the main direction has been we need to get out our holy huddle and invite some people to come with us on Sunday. You may not be comfortable with being able to share your faith and lead someone to the Lord. If you've been a Christian over 2 years, you should be able to do that. But again, you might not be able to do that. But you know what you can do? Anybody can do. Hey, would you go to church with me next week? I want to invite you to my church. I want to tell you what has happened to me since I met Jesus. And you just tell them your story. And anybody can do that, and everybody should be able to hear it. So if you bow your heads with me this morning, close your eyes. Maybe you're here, again, maybe you're watching, and you're thinking, I don't think I'm good enough to be a disciple of Jesus. If the tax collector was, and the terrorist was, you're good enough. He's inviting you. He's inviting you right now to give your life to Him. Some of you may be thinking, I'd like to, but I don't want to walk away from what I have right now. You see, what I have right now, it's a pretty sweet deal. You know, you'll never find a better deal than having the peace of God. Having no fear of death. Knowing that your sins are completely forgiven. Not having guilt. You see, that's what Jesus gives. The best that this world has to offer doesn't even come close to the best that Jesus can give you. So maybe this morning you want to make that decision. You want to be like Levi and Simon, and you'd say, yes, I'll follow you. This is how. From the bottom of your heart, the deepest place in your heart, you call out to God. You just pray something like this, just in your words. God, forgive me. I recognize I'm a sinner. And being a sinner is the only requirement that I have to be in your club, to be in your family. And I recognize that's me. I'm in. I'm a sinner. And I'm asking you to forgive me of all my sins. And give me that peace that he's talking about. That security he's talking about. I don't have to fear death. God, I give my life to you. I want to follow you just like these two men did. And today, that's my decision. And that's been your decision today. You prayed that prayer. Would you just do me a favor? Lift your hand. Anybody? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Maybe you're here today and you've been a believer a long time. And as you read that passage and you listen to this message, you, like me, have come to a point that I came to, and you realize you've looked down on people. You've been disgusted by some people. Now, there's nothing wrong with being disgusted with sin. Sin is disgusting to God, but sinners aren't. And people who sin do what sinners do. They sin. And guess what? You were one once too. And you heard this message and you realize that I've got to change my way of thinking. It's not my job to avoid all people like that. It's my job to seek them out and fish for them. And share with them the truth that can change their life. I got to get out of my holy huddle. And I got to start doing what God's called me to do as a believer. And that's to share my faith. That may sound frightening to you, but if you really are serious about doing that, would you pray this prayer? Would you say, God, forgive me first of all. I may not have denied you, but there's been places where I've been ashamed to speak up and share what you've done in my life. God, help me not to have that fear. Help me realize you are not the author of fear. Fear comes from the enemy. So God, help me this week. And wherever I am, at work or at school or wherever, help me to be bold just to share what you've done in my life. You don't have to preach. Just share what you've done in my life. And if you prayed anything similar to that today, believer, would you put up your hand? Okay, I see a few hands. God, thank you for your word. That it's clear, that it's simple enough to read and understand. Lord, it's not the things that we can understand that we don't do. It's the things that we do understand that we don't do. And Lord, we understand this today. So God, I just pray you'd help us as a church to do it. Now Lord, as we plan and pray for this upcoming mission trip in another country, Lord, I'm excited for the opportunity you've given us. But God, help us realize you give us opportunities every day just to cross the street or walking in the store or whatever. Help us use those opportunities too. Now, Lord, I thank you for the hands that were raised today. And I pray, Lord, they'll be followed through with commitment to you. Lord, I thank you for this message. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. You may be seated. Aaron has taken care of most of the announcements, so I'm going to ask our ushers to come forward and we'll receive our offering. Ask Tori to come back and the praise team will continue to worship. All right, let's pray. Father, thank you for, again, just for the church you've given us, the people you've given us to work with and partner with. Lord, thank you for your Holy Spirit that moves in us and convicts us and comforts us. And that's what I've sensed going on here today. God, I thank you for how you blessed us as individuals, how you blessed us as a church. And I pray, Lord, that you would bless our giving, that it could be used to build your kingdom And I ask this in Jesus' name. Serve you more. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. God bless you.
have to go with your cue string too, so it's put off so I can see how far it's going to cross. So we'll get them though. Normal things was able to work. Absolutely.